Before we start this video, a large thank you to John, iHoma, Dark5, Andrew Beers, Mohamed, Angus, A, Mohammed, and Ruby for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And as always, a massive thank you to Halo Burner for their continued support to the channel this month on Patreon. I hope you enjoy the video, my friend. Hello everybody, today we're going to continue our scene loading, and we're going to continue by making logic to unload these scenes. So we have load additive scene, load additive scenes, and load additive scenes coroutine currently. We're going to add on to this by basically creating a comment here for scene loading, and then right below that, scene unloading. Now, this is going to seem like a lot if you look at it as a whole, but when you go through this piece by piece, it will make sense. So if you feel overwhelmed, just take a step back and try to process what's going on here. But this is going to be the exact same thing as loading our scenes. And as always, if you have a better or more efficient way of doing this, I'd love to hear it in the comments. This is a system that is not so much, I'll say, fleshed out as my other systems, because this is kind of relatively new. I kind of threw this together like a month ago in Nephilim. So if you guys see a better way to do something, please share it. I'd love to hear it. So this is going to just do the exact same thing. We need obviously a list of things we do not want to unload. So we need to make that, because depending on where you're at in the game, let's say if you go to unload some scenes, but a player is in a scene you actually need loaded, you don't want to unload that. So we're going to check the do not unload list, which we don't have currently, because like I said, if a player is still there and you're going into a new scene, but they're in an older scene, you don't want to unload it on them, as you are the host of this game. And for that reason, you need certain parts of the world loaded still. Now you could unload the visuals if you want, if you haven't decoupled like I suggested before, but we're not going to worry about that right now. We're just going to take it on a scene by scene basis. So do not unload. This is going to be our list here called do not unload list. It's just a list of strings, as you can see. And then we're going to come back down here real fast, and we're going to, like I said, go through this with a for loop. And we're going to say if scene name, as in the scene name we're passing to this function, is equal to the current entry on the do not unload list that we're checking, we're going to simply return, because we're going to abort this. The scene is not going to be unloaded. Now, if you pass all those checks and the scene is not on the do not unload list, we need to check for all of our loaded scenes, and we're going to say if loaded scenes I is equal null, simply continue. It should never be null, but just in case it is, if loaded scenes I dot name is equal to the scene name, and the loaded scenes I is currently loaded, then we know we can unload it. So we're going to open up some curly braces here and say variable scene name, scene load is equal to network manager dot scene manager dot unload scene. And we pass our loaded scenes I, and then we break out of the for loop. And that's basically it for this function. Okay, so now we still need to do the other two. There's the coroutine, and of course the main function that calls the coroutine. So just in case you're unaware, obviously this is a singular function to unload one additive scene. We're usually going to unload stuff by lists. So we're going to pass a list to a public function, which then goes through a coroutine. And then the coroutine uses this singular function to unload scenes one by one, but it has to wait first for other scenes to load or unload. So the next function we make, I'm just going to make two of them at the same time right now, is we make a public void, which is what we used to call all the unloads. Unload additive scenes, we make it require a list of scene names, or we can call it scene list. And then lastly, we make a private coroutine, which again is going to iterate through this list. So let's do a new variable here for queued scene IDs, queued unload scene IDs. Similar to how we have queued scenes to load, we also have queued scenes to unload, because we can only unload one at a time. So let's go up here and copy our queued scene IDs lists and just paste it, or you can write it out and call it whatever you want, but it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be queued unload scene IDs equal to a new list string. So this works, again, identically to how we're loading scenes, but just in reverse. We can also make a queued scenes to unload count here. Because we have a queued scenes to load count. This just keeps track of how many's left. Okay, and then back down here again, we're iterating through our list of queued scene IDs. And what are we doing? Well, we need to check, is a scene loading or is a scene unloading? And if it is, we got to just wait around for a sec. So we can just do a yield return wait for fixed update. And that will just wait for, as it says, one fixed update. And then we can check again, is the scene still loading or unloading? If it's not, all right, we're going to continue. Now, we're going to go and call onload additive scene, and we're going to pass our queued onload scene IDs I for whatever iteration we're currently at here. And I'm going to copy the name as variable because I keep forgetting it, because I keep wanting to write Nephilims. And we're just going to paste this here, and we're going to say minus minus. All right, and then when we're done here, we can say yield return null. And then outside of this for loop here, we can simply say queued scenes to unload is equal 0, because when we get to this point, we're done. And then we can say unload additive scenes coroutine is equal to null. We don't have this as a variable yet, but we need to make this as a variable. I'm going to call this unload scenes. Actually, we're going to copy whatever the name is up top and just change it to unload instead of load. But we have a coroutine for loading scenes. Here it is. We need one for unloading scenes as well. So let's just copy that and add unloading, and that will be good. And I'm just going to paste this right here. That looks good. All right, so the final step is to actually make this unload additive scenes function call this coroutine. So what are we going to do here? Well, first we're going to check to make sure that we are in fact the host of the world. Otherwise, we want to return. You don't want to run this if you're not the host of the world. And then we're going to make a for loop here. And we're going to reference the scene list that we're passing. And then we're going to say queued onload scene IDs dot add. And we're going to add the scene list I, as in whatever iteration we're on the list. And then we're going to, whoops, this isn't Nephilim. We don't need the world tag. Maybe we'll add that in the future. So we're going to say unload queued scenes to unload, as in variable, is equal to the count of the current queued scene IDs list. And then finally, we're going to say if unloading additive scenes coroutine does not equal null, stop that coroutine right now. So we're going to say stop coroutine, unloading additive scenes coroutine. And then we're going to say unloading additive scenes coroutine is equal to start coroutine, unload additive scenes coroutine. Now I'm actually going to change the name as variable because it shouldn't be unloading additive scenes coroutine. I'd prefer unload. That sounds better to me. There we go. Naming conventions and whatnot. I'm going to save that now. That looks pretty good. And now I am going to come over here to the onScene event because we need to add a couple more things. Let's go down to unload complete. And what we're going to do is just basically check to make sure that we don't have any more scenes to load using this little variable here we have for the queue, like how many's left. Because, you know, you're going to do this several times. You want to make sure that we're down to 0 so it's done. So if queued scenes to unload is less than or equal to 0, it should never be less than, but I just feel the need to type that out. We're going to say queued unload scene IDs dot clear. So we're going to clear that list entirely. And then right below that, we can do a for loop, and we're going to iterate through our loaded scenes. And of course, we're going to make sure that the scene here in our loaded scenes, that is, if it's not loaded, we want to simply remove it from the list. So if loaded scenes I is not actually loaded, remove it from the list. And that's it. It's pretty simple there. Oh, one more thing too, I forgot. Right outside of the for loop, we also want to set is unloading scene to false. Excellent. Now I'm going to space these out because right now when you're writing so much code in this switch statement, like it is neat, yes, but when it's so close together like that, I don't know why, I just don't like it. Switch statements are great when you have a very simplistic series of, or just like a line of code in there, but when you have to throw in a for loop or a small if statement's fine, but yeah, it just looks a little bit messy. So I'm going to space it out right there. That looks nice to me. And of course, add comments too. So you glance at this, you know what's happening. But this is pretty much all we need right now for this. So let's go into our game and let's actually create our new scenes now. Now, thankfully, earlier in the video, or the series rather, I actually divided this scene up into sub areas. Now, in an actual game, this whole area will be one sub area. You know, you could keep the whole thing loaded, but because I don't have an actual world, I'm just going to pretend this is a world for you guys. So, because this is quite small, this scene, I mean, but I'm actually going to divide this up using the rooms I have here. So sublocation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But like I said, if this was Nephilim, this would be one room for me, or one additive scene. It's not very big at all. There's not a lot going on in here. But I am going to pretend like this is a massive world, and we're going to basically use this here. So I've dragged this scene into my hierarchy. I don't know if you noticed that. So what you can do is we can duplicate this scene we just made now, delete the camera and the light from it so it's empty basically, but then duplicate it a bunch so you have as many as you have sub areas. So area 01, sub area 0, area 01, sub area 01, etc. right to the count that you have. And I'm going to drag these all in here and drag everything in your different sub areas here into these different scenes, like so. And you just want to do that for all of these. Now note, you don't want all your objects in one game object in the hierarchy like I have if there's a lot of them. You want to separate them so you'd have like rocks, trees, floors. It makes it easier to load when the scene loads, apparently. It's quicker, so I'm told. I haven't done a test for it myself, but I got that from a person whom I trust. So we're going to go ahead and go to our build profiles now. Also go to your scene list and add open scenes currently right here, right now in the game to this list. That's very important too. Otherwise we can't reference them, we want to load them. And we're going to save that real fast. And let's go and create an empty game object under our managers. And I'm going to call this World Subscene Manager, or you could call it World Additive Scenes Manager, or you could call it World Area Manager. Whatever makes the most sense to you. But basically this is going to handle keeping track of people in specific sub areas and basically giving the list of scenes that should not be unloaded. So this will be used in your world. It will always be in your world. All right, so let's go ahead and create that. And I'm going to keep it very simple because we are getting pretty deep into this video now. So I was hoping to conclude this in 2 or 3, but I think I'm being a little naive. The next one may be a little bit longer, but we'll try to get the system fully functional then. But right now, what I want you to do is make a list of every area, like so. And then we're going to make a function for remove players from the previous location. Now, because a game like Elden Ring or Dark Souls isn't like, it's not generated through, a series of rules, it's handcrafted. We need to keep track of all these areas in a manner more like this. So it becomes a bit more, I'll say cumbersome, because we need to keep a lot of lists and such. But again, if you know a better way to do this, please hit me up. I'd love to hear it. Right now, we're going to keep a track of all these lists, and we're going to make this function remove player from previous location. We make it require a player variable, and then we go through every area in the game to check if this player is in there. And if they are, we remove them from that area. So right now I have 6 areas total. I'm going to check all 6 and make sure I remove the player from each of those areas. Now, we'd also make a list, and we're going to make this list be a list of strings, and we're going to call it generate do not unload list. And every time we check when we load new scenes, we basically want to reference this function and see what we're not allowed to unload. Because if you're in area 2 and I'm in area 4, we basically need to not unload any areas required by those 2 scenes. So let's start off by making a list called do not unload locations, equal that to a new list of strings. And then we're going to say do not unload locations add, and we're going to reference the world scene manager.instance and we're going to say world because we never unload the world scene. Now this is not a variable yet, so let's go make it along with the other scenes. So there, like I said before in episode 0 of this, or part 0 rather, you're never going to unload your main scene, which in my case I'm going to call the world scene. Every other scene can come and go, but the world scene must always stay when you're in the world. So header, scene IDs. Well, let's start making some. Now it's important that you make the string the same name as the actual scene. So I'll show you what I mean. So the world, we're going to call it world. And now the string would be, I'm just going to rename this to world 01. So I'm going to copy that. Okay. And likewise too, I'll take the scene out this. So it's main menu 01, but we're going to save that. So the name here will be world_01. Let's actually copy that so we can't mess it up. And then the variable string value in here is going to be world01. Now do the same thing for your other scenes because we have to keep track of them all. So for example, I believe it's area 01 _ sub area 00. And that's going to be whatever the name of that scene is again. So I'm going to click it here and click it twice so I can copy it. Just Control C, come back in here and do a Control V. And there we go. And I'm going to do that for all, I believe 6 of my areas total. So again, this is going to be a bit different. I don't think you're going to name them Area 1, Sub-Area 01, or maybe you are, but that would drive me nuts. What I do is I have Whispering Wood, or I'll say Area 01, Whispering Woods, Sub-Area 00, Cliff Precipice, or whatever, Precipice, sorry. And then I'll do like Forest Heart. So I'll keep the numbers, but I also have names. And this is obviously going to be very different depending on from game to game. You're not going to have the same scene location unless you're copying someone. So what you need to keep loaded or unloaded is going to change depending on your needs. So now back to our generate do not unload list. What we're going to do is make a variable here called players in room. And this is going to be, let's make some comments, make this clear actually. So first, the world scene is never unloaded. Okay, very clear. And next here, under this players in room, we're going to do a for loop. And we're going to check through each of these areas and see who's in the scene. So for example, each of the characters or players in area 01, if there's anybody there, so we're going to say if players in area 01, sub area 00 does not equal null, then we're going to simply say there is a player in the room. So we're going to iterate that by saying players in room plus plus. That just means we're going to add one. And I don't like the name of this variable, actually. I just realized room is probably a bad name for this, so we can change that to scene because it makes more sense in the context of what we've been saying. So I'm going to make a comment here first. Set the players in the scene count to 0. And then we're going to check for any players in this specific scene. So basically, every time we check a new scene, we're going to reset this count. So again, I'm going to rename this to scene just because that's going to fit more with the naming conventions as we've been calling it thus far. Want it to be not confusing. And then we'll say specific scene. Okay, cool. So what happens if there's more than one player? Well, if we know there's more than one player, we need to add some scenes to our do not unload list because somebody is here. Now, what scenes does this scene require is the question you have to ask yourself. So if the players in this scene are greater than 0, we need to add the scenes to the do not unload list that this scene requires. So obviously, area 00 is going to require itself. That's a part of the unload list. The first scene we don't want to unload is the area itself. So that would be do not unload locations.add world scene manager.instance, and we're going to add the scene name for area 00. What else does it require? Well, let's go back into the game and check. And again, this is going to be different depending on everybody's game. Mine's going to look way different than yours unless you're copying my level verbatim, which I encourage you not to do. So then we go over here and we're going to see this is area 00. So we're going to see it definitely requires 1, and it's going to require this connector here off of the end of the basement, which is area 2, I believe. No, it must be 3 maybe. No, it's 4. Okay, so it's going to be 1 and 4. So you can see here, here's 1 and here's 4, and you can see when it hits 0, it connects into 1 and into 4. So pretty simply, we go back in here and we copy this do not unload locations, and we add 1 and 4, and that's it. Pretty simple. Now we do this for every room. So to make this a little less confusing, I'm going to make a comment and move this variable. So let's put the variable up here for players in scene, and then we're just going to set it to 0 down here. Why am I doing this? Well, because every time we check a new room, we're resetting this to 0. Because you don't want to make players in scene 1, players in scene 2. It's redundant, then it's not necessary. So we'll just keep reusing the same variable, just keep resetting it. So I'll make a comment here for sub area 00, and now we can paste this. And then we can do this, and then sub area 01. And I'm just going to change 0s to 1 here because, again, I named my scene names something very simplistic and boring. And now we'll do one more on video together. So area 01, what does area 01 require? Well, you can see here it definitely requires this big room up top, this room here to the right, and then this room here to the left. So it's going to be 0, and it's going to be 3, and it's going to be 4. Sorry, it's going to be 0, 1, 2, and 4. So we have the room above it to the left and to the right. So I'm going to add these scenes to the do not unload list if you're in this area. So if there's anybody in area 01, we don't want to unload area 01, obviously. But then we don't want to unload 0, 2, or 4. All right, very good. And we can save that. Now I will do the rest off video because, again, this is just going to be basically the same rule over and over again. But just to show you, I'll put them in for you so you can see on video. We have sub area 02, and since this is sub area 02, we know we're going to keep scene 02 loaded, so that's always on our list right away. We have to check in the world for what else we need. And then we do, again, 03, and we need to check in the world for what we need for 03, but we always keep 03 required. And then again for 04, we know 04 is going to be loaded, so we're going to keep that loaded, obviously. And then we need to do it lastly for 05, which is the last one I have, I believe. Yes, it is. So we're going to paste this one last time and change the 2s to 5s, just like so. And now I'm going to go back in my game and check real quick, and I'll be right back. Okay, there is everything as I needed. So that is basically going to be it for now, but what we want to do too is to get rid of this annoying error is we want to make sure we return this list, because as you can see, this function requires us to send a list. So just simply return the do not unload locations list we just made. All right, looks good. I'm going to save that, and that will be it for this video. So in the next video, what we're going to do hopefully is actually make the triggers in our world to load and unload scenes and handle loading the proper scenes when you load into the game world for the first time or through a save file that you've already created. Now, we're also going to discuss the limitations of scenes as variables. As far as I know right now, the way we want to do this is we're going to use a series of enums to get a scene by a string we will pass. And this will allow us to use a switch statement to do things like load specific scenes around one scene when a player enters a new area and enters a trigger, but we'll go over all of that in the next video. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you all have a very lovely weekend, and a massive thank you to my patrons. It is because of each and every one of you that this series may continue, so you have my gratitude. I'll see you guys in the next one.